Hi, everyone. It's Monique here from CK-12, and whether it's your first time joining today or whether you've been here before, I'd like to welcome you. Today, I'll be showing you some of an interactive math lesson on CK-12 on the topic of ratios. So by the end of today, I hope that you will really understand maybe what a ratio is, how it can be used, and how to even write ratio statements for yourself, depending on the situation. Now, first question is, what is a ratio? A ratio is a comparison between two things or two numbers. There's a train going by right now. Well, why don't I start off with a situation? Let me grab a few things. I have a painting right here, and let's say I wanted to recreate this painting. So I asked my mom to go to an arts and crafts store and get me a canvas so I can work on painting. But I want to know how long this is so I can tell my mom what size canvas to get at the store. The thing is, I can't seem to find a ruler anywhere around my room. I can't find it around my house right now, even though I know it's there. So what can I do? Well, something I can do is I can use an object and I can try and measure the length of the painting this way. So for example, on my desk, I have an eraser. And let's say I try and measure the length of this painting using the eraser. So for example, I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the painting is 6 eraser lengths long. So for example, if I wanted to tell my mom, hey, could you get me a canvas that is 6 eraser lengths long, she would be able to take this eraser and measure it herself. But let's say she's already in her car in the parking lot of the store and she doesn't have an eraser in her car. Well, maybe I know that she has a candy in her car, and I can let her know how long the canvas is in terms of candy. So maybe I take my candy and I measure it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. So this painting is 18 candy lengths long. So I can use that and make a ratio based on the numbers that I use. So remember, a ratio is comparison between two quantities, two numbers. So let's take a look at how we can write ratio statements based on this situation. So for example, let's look at the numbers that we use. So what numbers did we come up with? Well, one set of numbers we came up with was we had to use 6 erasers to describe the length of 1 painting. So in this case, the two numbers that we're comparing in this ratio are 6 to 1. Now, what other numbers did we use in that scenario? Well, we talked about the number of candies, right? So it took 18 candies to match the length of 1 painting. Now, can we compare another set of numbers? So let's see, we took a look at erasers to paintings, candies to paintings. Now, what if we tried making a ratio statement based on the comparison between erasers and candies? So let's do that. So in this case, to make the length of 1 painting, it would take 6 erasers and 18 candies So in this case, we're comparing the numbers 6 to 18. Now, let's take a look at the lesson for today. And I'm going to start by showing you the cafe. So in CK-12, we have a discussion forum called the cafe, if you haven't heard of it before. And pretty much we'll go to the post for this lesson. And in this post, there is a link to the lesson. There's also a link to the live stream and some related content. I have posted some questions down here. You can answer. You don't have to do it today. You can answer it after today's lesson. But feel free to comment below. So for example, I want to know for your activity, what objects do you want to measure in your household and what could you use to measure them? So in this case, I found one painting to 6 erasers or to 18 candies, or eraser to candies. You can even measure the objects that you measured with. And looks like Vera already commented and compared laptop screens to pencils, her monitor to pencils, and pencils to chapsticks. So that's great. She found objects in her house to do that with. So let's move on to the lesson for today, on which you can go to yourself using this link. And today's lesson is titled Pictures of Ratios. Now, as an overview of what you'll be covering in this lesson, you'll be looking at the first interactive, which talks about comparing the numbers of blocks. So in this case, we're not looking at the shapes or the size of the blocks, but we're looking at sorting the number of different colored blocks. So here, let's look at, we want to see how many red, blue, and green blocks there are. So we'll sort them into different categories. So I'll do that by dragging these blocks. So it looks like we have 3 red, 3 blue, and 4 green blocks. And then we can answer some ratio statements based on the blocks that we counted. So in this case, the number of red blocks to blue blocks is, well, because we sorted it out, we can see the numbers quite clearly. 1, 2, 3 red blocks to 1, 2, 3 blue blocks. So we can fill in this statement as 3, 2, 3. And there are a few more statements for you to answer for yourself. I wanted to point out that you can actually hit the reset button down here, reset the interactive, and you'll get a different set of blocks. So in this case, we have 2 green blocks, 3 blue blocks, looks like 3 red blocks. Afterwards, there's a set of questions that you can answer. And then the next activity is answering some questions about the numbers that you can compare using ratios based on an election and voting. So you'll compare numbers like how many votes one person got against another person. Moving on, the next interactive is going to be talking about ratios and how they might be related to tape diagrams. So sometimes you'll get different diagrams, and that diagram has a lot of information about numbers that you can use to write ratio statements with. So in this interactive, what we'll be looking at is the number of sections of blue sections and the number of red sections here. And notice that since each section is the same length, we're also looking at the ratio between the length of the blue area and the length of the red area. So we'll count those, fill in the statements, and you'll be able to look at more questions after you solve the first one. In this activity, we'll be looking at a real-world example. In this case, it's going to be looking at how many miles trucks will be able to drive on a certain amount of gasoline. So this is pretty helpful because you want to be able to describe how far a car will go based on how much gas you put in it. So up here, you can click on which truck you want to solve some problems with. You can even do all three of them. And based on the numbers that you see here, you'll input it and complete these statements. So in this case, the two numbers that'll probably be relevant for you is 305. And this talks about the number of miles that the truck will drive. And this number will talk about the amount of gas that you'll be using and putting in. You'll notice here that there's two sets of statements depending on the order. So you can compare the miles that a car can drive and the amount of gas that you put in it, or you can compare the amount of gas you put in to the number of miles that the car will drive. So after completing a set of questions on that, come to my personal favorite interactive in this lesson, which is mixing paint colors. So in this interactive, what you can do is normally when you make paint, you take a few primary colors, you mix them together and you get other combination of colors. So in this case, I can add maybe 1 cup of red paint to 1 cup of yellow paint and see what kind of color I can get out of it. And I can try and combine different amounts of paint and see what we can get. You'll notice that up here, there's a tape diagram that will show you the ratio of different colored paints that you've used so far. And ratios are usually, when we talk about ratios, we usually use two numbers and compare two numbers. In this case, something you can do is you can compare all three amounts of paint. So you can compare red paint to yellow paint to blue paint. So in this lesson, you can create the color brown using the ratio of 3 cups of yellow paint to 4 cups of red paint to 5 cups of blue paint. And that is another ratio you can write about. And then afterwards, there's some questions for you to complete. And then if you want to keep going with adaptive practice, you can hit start practice and get some more questions to practice writing ratio statements about. Something I wanted to show you is if you click here under the toolbar and go to related content, there's some other resources that'll help you as you are learning about ratios and how to write ratio statements. If you go to the cafe and look at some of the other questions that I've asked that you can do as you're completing the lesson, you can remember that you can comment below and type in some responses. Like for example, in the mix the paint interactive, what colors did you make? What ratio of red, blue, and yellow paints combined to make that color? And so you can answer that for me. And then I'll be able to look at it, review it, and maybe even talk about it in the next lesson. So there's a few questions that you can answer for me. You can even tell me any questions you still have about either something that we talked about today, or something in the rest of the lesson or the other resources that I provided you. One of the other links that I included in my cafe post is a link to Applix. And here it's just talking more about the mileage of a truck, how far you can go on a certain amount of gas, and there's some extra challenge me questions for you to do. That's all the time I have for today. I want to thank you for tuning in. I'll be back on Thursday with another math lesson at 11:30 Pacific time. And then my friend Lauren will be here tomorrow at 11:30 Pacific time to talk about a science lesson with a simulation. If you have anything else, please add it to Cafe. I'm excited to take a look and see your responses. Until next time, have a lovely day.